Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. I'm so excited because I think we got another really forward-looking conversation today.
Yes. We have a very, very special guest, long overdue, a legend in the HR tech space, former SAP SuccessFactors product leader, Gartner Research VP, the author of the Work in Progress Substack, and partner at the VC firm Acadian Ventures, and the undisputed champion, in my opinion, of HR tech metaphors, Mr. Thomas Otter. Thank you. Welcome to the show, man.
That's a nice introduction. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Julie. Great to see you both.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, man. This is very exciting. I'm so happy to have you, and I'm excited to ask you a million questions. So,
and he will. I'll try to jump in and save you now and again.
Yes.
I can cope. I'm a big boy.
I'm sure you get bombarded, right? Julie, you want to do the honors?
Yeah. So, Thomas, one of the things we like to ask people is, how the heck did you get into the HR payroll? How'd you get into this space? Was it intentional, or did you just float in?
It was completely by mistake. It was about 100 years ago. I was at university. I was studying HR. I was studying labor law and industrial relations. And this guy came around the university and said, gave a talk about HR technology. This is probably 1992. And I listened to this and thought, oh, this is interesting. And then he said at the end of his talk, he says, does anyone in the class here have a computer? And, I was kind of the only one to put up my hand. He says, great, come see me afterwards. I might have a job for you. So I went to see him afterwards and I said, hey, tell me a bit more. And I said, what's the starting salary? And he said, twice the starting salary of an HR manager. And I said, cool, you got me. And I've been involved in HR tech, kind of ever since. I ended up working for SAP in South Africa. That's where I grew up in South Africa. You probably tell from my accent. And then I ended up working for SAP, and I built a career with SAP. And I went to Gartner, and then back to SAP. So a bit of a backwards and forwards with SAP and Gartner over the years. But that's how I kind of got started. So I actually started at the tail end of the mainframe, and I went through the client server.
Uh-huh.
The web and cloud and so on. And now we're in AI la la land. So,
yeah. So is it the tech that makes you stay and that constant innovation, or is there a people aspect, or what makes you stay in this?
I don't know. It's the only thing I'm good at, it's like
same,
it's like I've kind of ended up in this space and I've sort of thought about doing other stuff, but then it's kind of what I know, it's the world that I've known. What I've kind of done is I've done different roles within HR tech. So I've been a consultant. So I've implemented software. I've been in pre-sales and sales. I've spent a lot of time in product. I've been an analyst. And now I'm a full-time investor. So I've had a variety of roles, but so I've kind of had different lenses on the same subject matter, which is maybe kind of unusual.
Keeps it fresh, right? It keeps it fresh and still.
There's always kind of an overlap. There's always something, when you look at it, it kind of looks like I had a plan, but I didn't actually have a plan.
Yeah,
none of us.
You sound a lot like this resonates really well, Thomas. I have a very similar experience set that is from all sides, and it definitely was not entirely by plan. It just sort of luck, I guess, maybe. But well, we're really thankful to have you, and we appreciate that you landed in our space, man, because we sure need it. I got to say, Thomas, I want to ask you just a personal question before we get going. I think it's interesting, the irony in the love that you have for classic music and vinyl. I know you put some great music in all of your Substack posts, and if anyone isn't a subscriber, be sure to. I'll share the links for that. But do you ever find it interesting? You have this love for sort of an analog world, but you invest and operate in a digital world.
Yeah, I find the it sounds kind of poncy, but the tactile process of putting on a record is a really cool thing, And when people come around to the house, I say, hey, pick a record, and it takes people back and they sort of flick through them and I haven't seen this one for ages. Whereas, and that's a lot of fun. I do listen to music online, and sometimes a week will go by without me putting a record on, but then there'll be a day where I put on 4 or 5, So Yeah, it's fun, and you can geek out on the tech as well.
Yeah. No, there's I think it's interesting about the records coming back. I think if it was 23, 24, they actually surpassed CDs again. So that's pretty interesting for the first time since like the 70s, 80s, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty interesting. But I thought that was
it's fun
just
when I travel. If I've got time, I'll go and find a record store. So if I'm in Cisco, I'll go into Amoeba Records or Rasputin or whatever, and invariably come out with half a dozen things that I didn't have, and then sometimes I find out, oh damn, I bought the same record twice. But
I can see for you the work-life balance scale is like 5 little records. How many did I get?
Yeah. I love it. So look, Thomas, let's talk the state of the HR tech marketplace. I mean, it's pretty healthy, from what I can tell. I just saw the data come out from One Work Tech, which is obviously our friends George LaRoque.
Yeah.
He does great work over there. I love his work. Q1 2025, I think it was 1.24 billion over about 58 deals, 20% up year over year, I think. And talent is clearly back in style. But what are you seeing in terms of the health of the market right now?
I think we're in an interesting phase because we're trying to really figure out what AI does.
Mm-hmm.
We don't quite know yet. So it's very exciting. It's also it's quite interesting because we're challenging many of the assumptions we've had for the last 20 years or so. I mean, it's scary to think about it, but Workday's 20 years old, right? So, SaaS has been around and established for 20 years now. It's been the dominant business model for I don't know how long. And now we're starting to look, for new ways of doing things. So there's, lots of exciting opportunities on the tech side.
Yeah.
And there's also some interesting challenges on the business model side as well. So it's a super interesting time to be looking at the space. I think though, what I find quite interesting is that quite a lot of the pundits in the space talk about revolution and change and, every week there's something new or whatever. But, the incumbents are still the incumbents.
Yeah.
So, my position at the moment is we haven't had a revolution yet.
Right.
Because the revolution involves the bloody overthrow of the incumbents, right? That's what happens, right?
Right.
If you take revolutions in history, there's normally some sort of violent overthrow of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been no violent overthrow of Oracle, SAP, Workday, ADP, Paylocity, etc. All these guys are still doing solid business. So I think sometimes this hype of around a revolution every second Thursday gets to me a little bit because we are we're on the cusp of something new perhaps, but we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah. No, I would agree. You said a lot there that I want to unpack, but I want to talk about the fact that I think it's, I think back to my career. I started my career in HR, right? I've all I've ever done since I was 18, ironically. And I think it's really cool to see HR tech on a golf shirt, right? On a Tiger Woods or whatever. It's great to see HR tech on a Super Bowl commercial, right? We saw that this year. But there's funds now dedicated to HR tech. And I know that at Acadian, that's a big focus for you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your thesis over there and like what is the lens that you guys are bringing and sort of testing here, I guess, with your bets?
Yeah. So the fund was started by Jason in 2019. Mm-hmm. And he'd actually been at Cornerstone. He was the head of strategy and M&A and so on at Cornerstone. And he'd actually been running their corporate fund. And he said, well, how come there aren't like specialist HR tech funds? Well, there's the angel investors here and there, but they're in a few sort of funds, but there were no real like dedicated, funds with, significant investment capability focusing on HR tech or future of work or work tech in the same way that they were in like med tech or insurance tech or fintech or regulatory technology or, other areas of climate tech, for instance. So, in many of these areas, there are very sophisticated ecosystems of funds, but there wasn't really one in HR tech. And you kind of thought that was weird, given the size of the market that we knew. And then, so I was actually, one of the early investors in the first fund, in Fund 1, and as a limited partner. So the terms in VC, the two terms you need to know in VC,
Yeah.
General partner and limited partner. Limited partner is an investor in the fund, and the general partner is the people who run the fund and make the investment decisions. Right. So, in fact, in Fund One, I was a limited partner. So I'd left SAP at that time, and so I put some of my my own personal money into Acadian in Fund One, and Jason and I started working very closely together. And I'd gone back to university at the time, and I sort of getting more and more involved in the investment side of things. So I've done some work with private equity and with other venture firms. And, I started to find myself working more and more with founders. And so, basically my idea is that we understand the space really well. And we can take advantage of the network that we built up over decades. So many of our investors, so many of our LPs are people that are in the industry or were in the industry. And then we have, great networks in both the startup world and in the incumbents, and also in the broader HR community. And so we bring that expertise to bear on our investing decisions, and then also we hope that we are helpful to the founders once we've made the investments, so that we can help them partner or compete with the incumbents.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I notice about Acadian, when I look at the areas that you guys focus on, it's a lot of the blocking and tackling of HR in a lot of ways, the infrastructure, the APIs, right, the compliance, and even things that are obviously taking shape, emerging products. But I think I think over the last several years, we have taken our eye off the ball of that. Everyone's gotten very, they've chased these little, very, very flashy, darling sort of talent products, point solutions, but they've taken their eye off of the ball, I think, in terms of the foundational infrastructure, where really the rubber meets the road in HR. And if you don't have all those things, those fancy, shiny, whatever, aren't really going to work out. And so is that purposeful? Because I think that when you look at some of those things, you go, well, that's not the sexy HR stuff, right? But it's very much the critical stuff. Is that a purposeful move, obviously, or?
Partly. So we are investors, right? So we are, at the end of the day, we have a fiduciary obligation to our limited partners to make money for them, right?
Yeah. And
the way we do that is we pick companies that are going to, the term in VC is return the fund.
Right.
So, some of the challenge with some of the smaller niches, for instance, sometimes within recruitment or within learning or within talent management, is that you can build a nice business, but you can't build a very big one.
Yeah.
And so, we're looking for exceptions. So, we've made bets in the talent management space. We've made bets in the learning management space, and some of those are doing really well for us. So it's not that we ignore those spaces, but we think that the underlying infrastructure is really important. So, and that is changing. So we've made bets in terms of integration technologies. Those, one with Combo, the other one with Datascaler. We've made bets in next generation learning with Arist, which is doing some very interesting things with AI in learning. In the benefit space, we've made a couple of investments. Obviously, in Fund One, we had Nomi Health, which has done really, really well for us. And then in Fund Two, we've done two benefits-related investments. One of them is called Penzilla, which is a German pension play. We think German pension is due for some major disruption, given the move away from purely state-funded pension into a mixture of state and private pension. And then we've just done an investment into Origin Benefits, which we think is going to revolutionize how global benefits works. So we have an interest in things that have longevity and that are going to build iconic businesses. And I always look back. I have massive respect for companies like ADP and UKG that have created really generational businesses, and SAP and Oracle are the examples of generational businesses, and we want to fund the next generation of generational business, of multi-generational businesses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think it speaks those themes and thesis speaks to a very long game, which obviously most VCs are playing.
Yeah.
But I love it because I think this is the foundational
Yeah.
stuff in HR that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you about, just some of the hype cycles that you've been through, right? I mean, you've been around the game for a long time. You very much have seen it, it all kind of come and go. COVID, boom, right? We had the pandemic acceleration. Now we've got the AI kind of reset, I think people are calling it. How is this cycle different for HR tech in terms of what you think we're facing and what you think is here and what the opportunity is?
I think in some ways it's not different. So we talk about the things that are not different at the moment, is that it's easier to build the tech than it is to implement it. And that's the same, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with human beings and organizations, and you're dealing with change management, and you're dealing with existing infrastructures and all the rest of it. So it's pretty cool to build some technology, and the mechanisms for building technology are getting more and more exciting. But the mechanisms for change management, for implementation, for corporate politics, and all those things are still complicated and awkward and difficult. So deploying these solutions at scale effectively in organizations remains challenging.
Right.
And I think sometimes we forget that it is about, it's not what about the vendor, it's not about what the vendor releases, it's about what customers have in production.
Right.
And I keep going about this, that a proof of concept is not production, right? So I think at the moment we have that a lot of the times we see the potential of the new technologies, and we get excited about that, and we should get excited about that. But the gap kind of widens between the potential of a technology and the actual capability of organizations to deploy it effectively, and we're kind of in that cycle at the moment. We see it. We see it quite. We're seeing a bit of that at the moment, where people are saying, "Oh, I can fire all my people and deploy AI," and then whoops, a year later, I'm like hiring people again. So we're going to be having a bit of that. But fundamentally, it's we have the opportunity to challenge a lot of the technical assumptions of the past and the constraints of the past. And maybe I'll pick up on one.
Yeah,
we can talk about this all day, but let me just pick up on one concept. So if we go back to the first business computing, it was actually in the UK in 1951. That was the first use of a computer for a business process was at the Lions Tea Room, and one of the first products they did was payroll. Right.
Oh wow.
So payroll really kicked off enterprise software back in the early 50s. And since then, what we've basically done is we've taken unstructured conversations, data, and we've found ways of structuring it in order to deal with the constraints of a computer. And for the last 70 years, that's what we've done. So if you look at the data models of the mainframe era, you look at the data models of client server, you look at the data models of SaaS applications, they're all relatively similar, and they're all essentially creating structured data.
Yep.
And they get clever and clever at doing it. But if you looked at the data model of an early, if you looked at that first HR system of 1951, and you looked at Workday or something similar today, the data models will be almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
There'd be some differences and some clever things here and there, but essentially they'd be doing the same fundamental thing. Now, what's intriguing at the moment is that we have the opportunity now, or we get into the opportunity where artificial intelligence is actually relatively good at understanding unstructured data.
Yes.
Right. So we're actually getting to a point where we're heading towards a point where we might not need as much structured data as we did in the past.
Right.
So the challenge at the moment is we're in a bit of a middle phase at the moment. Right. So what we're doing at the moment with all this agent stuff is like we're trying to get computers in the form of agents to act like people, to fill in screens that were designed for people.
Right.
In order that the weaknesses of people could be minimized and the opportunities of the computer could be the challenges of the computer could be maximized too. So we're kind of taking, we're taking unstructured, we're using the agent, which is essentially an unstructured tool. We're then structuring it to feed it into a computer that was designed with the constraints of the computer in mind for humans to input, and humans are not very good at inputting into computers.
Right. It reminds me of using plugs like the Apple plugs that are USB-C versus A, and you're using all these converters to convert new technology to old technology.
Well, I described it. We've got computers, cosplaying being people, and people are not very good at working with computers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are at the moment. So what I kind of think is that we'll get some progress with these agentic layers and people doing stuff on top of existing infrastructure, so improving recruitment processes or workflows or whatever. But what we're going to have to do in the longer term is we're going to have to rethink those underlying applications.
Yeah.
And because we'll be able to work with them differently. So we won't have the same architectural constraints in the future at that underlying level that we have today, because the computer will be much more comfortable in dealing with unstructured.
The bandwidth will be much faster.
Data. So we won't need to structure things quite as much.
Yeah.
So that means that maybe rules engines and a lot of these things can become fundamentally more conversational and intuitive in nature, so that we need less complexity, and that the complexity shifts into the AI rather than into this a priori kind of configuration of this complexity. But we're not quite there yet, because we don't yet have the reliability in elements of the AI to really delegate things completely to AI. So this is the kind of position we're in at the moment, is that we see the opportunity of this, but then hang on a minute, every now and again it doesn't work so well. So what do we do? And so this is why there's this challenge between proof of concept and actual production at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, does this go to this your point of, I think, you're saying about sort of ripping out your ERPs and going AI, right? That's kind of like the Klarna catastrophe, and everybody can Google that. We've talked about it on the show. Yeah. But so where is SaaS still? I mean, SaaS is still necessary, at least for their short term, until AI can be the entire interface, I guess, or the UI. But what are your thoughts on the whole SaaS is dead thing?
No, SaaS is not dead. It just it's becoming less relevant, or it's not becoming the only show in town. So I think the thing we make about SaaS, we think about as a technology, right? SaaS is actually two things, right? It's both a software delivery mechanism. So cloud computing is a software delivery mechanism, right? But it's also a commercial mechanism, in a way of consuming software. And the real innovation, I think, wasn't so much in the cloud. It was actually in the idea that you could move to this new form of licensing model. Mm-hmm. So that was the power of SaaS, was the idea both for the vendors and for the end users, is you had this new form of licensing, a new form of software consumption that was useful for the end customer, because essentially they were moving it from being a CapEx expenditure into an OpEx, which for CFOs was something that they loved. It was predictable. Yeah. You could scale it up and down depending on consumption and so on. And you wouldn't be having to be buying all this hardware and all the rest of it. So there were all kinds of positive things on the customer side with SaaS commercially, and there were also benefits on the vendor side, because you had this predictable model in terms of ARR. So in terms of annual recurring revenue model, where you could say, okay, well, customers paying me, paying me, I don't know, $30K this year. They're going to the 3-year contract, so they're going to be paying me $30K again for the next 2 years, and then there's a strong likelihood they're going to renew. So the financial model, I think, of SaaS does not get enough credit for SaaS in the SaaS.
Right.
But the challenge at the moment is some of those assumptions around ARR are being challenged, right? So there's the consumption-based models and outcome-based models, and so I think on the one hand, SaaS becomes challenged on the commercial side. Mm-hmm. I think ARR is kind of losing its meaning now, because people use it as a shortcut as a synonym for revenue, and it's not. It's a subset of revenue. But cloud computing as the distribution model of software, as a technical distribution model of software, is probably stronger than ever, right? So I don't think cloud computing goes away.
Yeah.
I just think it becomes part of the furniture as
Right.
as things. So SaaS doesn't go away, but it just will, elements of it will change. So I think that how you consume software will change in terms of who will pay for it.
Agreed.
And we don't know yet what these business models are going to be, but they're still kind of emerging and changing. But
Right.
the business model is under stress and under change. And then some of the assumptions we made about SaaS technically, sometimes things we labeled as SaaS maybe weren't so much necessarily SaaS. Okay, you use a browser as the UI. You have some sort of AWS or hosted application in the background. Some of those technical things may be challenged. I think UI is an interesting one where I think there's new ways to think about UI, which might move us away from the browser dependency that we've had for the last 15 years or so. But SaaS isn't dead, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not the only show in town anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's got to hold the data, right? It's got to be the infrastructure for you to be connecting all these things and doing the things that you want to do. But I do think that at some point, the conversational UI is just going to be the way we do things. I can't imagine we're going to be logging into systems and, to your point, filling in forms. And
I think the UI will change. But we've been through sort of UI turmoil before, right? We if we go back in our past, we were in a world where only administrators use systems, and the idea of employee self-service was really quite quite challenging when it initially came out. People were afraid of it and so on. So I think we'll have new forms of UI. I don't think it will just be chat. I think that there'll still be place for screen-based
mobile for sure
interactions. But who knows what happens with video? Who knows what happens with all these different modes of systems interaction? But it's going to be much more richer. It's going to be much more much simpler for people to interact with systems. And I think the voice will become part of that. But I still think people will be typing, but
chatting
as much as they were. I mean, my kids type more than I do, right? So
I think for me, some of the most intriguing part about that and the move from structured to unstructured data and harnessing that is at some level, you risk maybe losing the comparability, because now things are unstructured, and so there can be some implied differences or nuances between things, or attraction to a certain channel or way that it's served up. And do we then need to figure out what is the mechanism for ensuring that we don't lose comparability, by serving
Precisely.
up what's been asked for?
Precisely. So I think that if I make a prediction for HR systems going forward, the juicy bit's going to be audit.
Mm-hmm.
So what AI made this calculation at what point in time with what rule set, right? So can we recreate that decision? And so being able to have clever auditability of what AI has done. So let's imagine we go, let's take this forward a bit, and let's say we can get to a point where, let's just take a payroll example.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that AI is super smart, and I can give it the German payroll law, right? And I can give it 10 years of payroll data, and I say, get to it, And now, in theory, it should be able to do it because it's a relatively constrained data set in terms of the payroll rules. It's something that can be adequately interpreted into some sort of a decision tree. So at some point, AI is going to be able to figure out payroll itself.
Yeah,
we're not there yet, but at some point it will.
Yeah,
and when it
hopefully.
does that, then what's going to be interesting is when it's not right, how do you understand what went wrong?
Right.
Because the more black box it becomes, the harder it is to interpret the to analyze the black box. So
Yeah.
I think what will happen is for a lot of these things, we'll get to a point where these tools can do a really good job, but we'll wait until the delay of getting these things into genuine production will be around. You'll be around the auditability of these solutions.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sure.
I would agree. There's going to have to be a deep understanding and a deep trust, particularly from payroll, but I'm sure from HR as well, for how these things are behaving. And we can see that now with some of the lawsuits that are spinning around.
And an awful lot more focus on, training AI, or how do you tweak it going forward, and then move that and promote that through the auditability change.
Yeah. And localize it.
And localize it.
So I want to come back to what you were talking about, Thomas, about just the way, I want to talk about buyers, right? The way they ought to be looking at these things today. You have an article about the wedding cake and the cupcake, about enterprise buying of technology. What should talk about that at first, and then I want to talk about what do you feel like buyers really ought to be focusing on right now when they're out there making decisions to add these solutions to their stack.
And I think the first thing you need to do is you need to learn something about AI. I'm saying to HR leaders, this is a great opportunity for you, because many of you, not all of you, but a good number of you have actually neglected your technical, your software education in the past, right? I sit down with a CFO, and the average CFO, knows their way around SaaS data models and architectures, and can have a robust discussion about the advantages of SaaS compared to on-premise software. Right? Most HR directors can't. Some can, but most can't. And what I'm saying now is you're going to go to reset, right? So you've got an opportunity to actually learn about AI.
Mm-hmm.
And you should take that opportunity with both hands, because it's this intersection of the human and the AI that is going to be so interesting and so fascinating, right? So I hate to go back too far in the past. I sound like Bill Kutik, but if I go back to like Ford and DuPont and those guys who thought about the production line, there was a lot of thought that went into this idea of how does the human and the physical machine work together, and that was quite transformative at the time. We think about
that's where innovation happens.
We think about all that change, and we potentially we're at a similar moment now where we are working out how AI and humans can thrive together.
Right.
So what that is. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity for HR leaders to step up.
Right.
Because there's kind of two ways it's going to happen, right? The IT people are going to play at doing HR, right? Because let's imagine from them that we have, that the work starts to fuse together. Agentic stuff, let's assume it works. Agentic stuff and human, you get questions about how you organize this. So who takes the lead? Is it the tech people who take the lead? Or is it the human people who take the lead? So, but, I think there's a very interesting opportunity in that, everyone's talking about the data example, but I think, if I look at HR leaders of the future, the ones that are going to be successful and that are going to have massive impacts on their organizations are the ones that have taken the time to actually get to grips with AI.
Yeah.
Not just read the odd article here and there, but actually, you don't have to be like a deep program in it, but you have to actually understand the strengths and weaknesses and implications of AI at a level where you can actually have a coherent conversation with a technical person about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'd say. The first thing to do is make sure that you as a leader know something, and make sure you've got people on your team that actually know what they're talking about when it comes to AI. But the better question, the stronger the people are on the team, the better questions you can ask of your vendors. And the other thing that I'd say to you is assess what products can do today.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to get kind of futuritis. In 6 months' time it's going to be doing this, or in a year's time it's going to be doing this, and you can get all this sort of future. You can get mesmerized by the future.
Yeah.
But I think the thing today is what can it do for you now in production?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Not what can it do, proof of concepts. Yes, you've got to do those things, but what can I do now in production that is impactful?
Yeah.
And it might be something relatively small, but actually in production, actually in
Yes.
real life, live, that your legal people have signed off, that your IT security is solid, that you have good audit capabilities and all the rest of it that you can actually use in production.
Right.
And
Right.
having that kind of approach to actually doing, even as relatively small, doing something real
Yeah.
is much more useful to you than having some like future vision of where AI is going to do,
Yeah.
because what will happen is your vision will get so far ahead of where your reality is. So,
Yeah.
what do you have today? What systems do you have today? What data do you have today? How good is your data? How good is your organized? How good is your discipline around data? Because AI depends on data to work, right? It's obvious,
Yes.
but the the more disciplined you've been with your data over the last decade,
Hmm.
the more likely you are to be successful with AI in the next decade.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So your understanding of data and look your data in the mirror and say how good's my data is going to be really important for setting the frame in which where you can be successful with AI. Now, I think in the long term, AI is going to be very good at helping you make your data better, but you do need to have a reality check on on where you are. And what I'd say is go and find out from the business what are the business problems
Yep.
that you need to solve. So, if you are a fast growing startup, your biggest problem is probably hiring. If you are a well-established company that's been running for 20, 30 years, probably your biggest challenge is reskilling and so find the business problems that are most appropriate for your organization and focus your AI efforts on a specific business problem and solve one problem effectively.
Right. Agreed.
Once you've done that, then the doors open to rethink bigger and more sophisticated activities. But I would say be realistic about what you can do in the next 6 months or so, and it's something that you could do in 6 months.
Right. Yeah. That's great advice.
Deliver that well.
Thomas, one of the things that many of my vendor clients that I'm working with are really thinking through right now are pricing for AI, right? Do we charge? What do we charge? When and where? I feel like we're going to get to an outcomes-based sort of future, right? State. We will get to an outcome-based model in some way, at least, or maybe a mix. Do you think that's the case? What are your thoughts? Maybe a mix of license and outcomes?
When outcomes are clear and you have obvious great causality to the outcome, then outcome-based pricing makes a lot of sense. But a lot of what we do in HR isn't that clear and straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think this lead to outcomes-based pricing without really understanding what the outcomes are and what the causality is to the outcomes is going to end up in tears for both sides of the both sides of the fence. So I think we will get more outcomes-based pricing, but I think it's got to get clear about what those outcomes actually are, and how does the outcome link back to the product or back to the service itself, because it's only the product may be only one variable related to that outcome. So I can see us having all kinds of arguments over you say something like, okay, well, our product lowered your churn or whatever, but maybe the churn lowered because the global economy is slow.
Right?
Maybe and so you're going to have these factors. It's hard to get to
how to measure it.
You do. It's hard to get to meaningful causality. So I think I look forward to some form of new pricing models, but I think this leap to outcomes based based pricing
Yeah.
needs a bit more work.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's way too soon. I think longer term. I think it's a hybrid.
To me,
really,
that harkens
somewhere
back
in the
to
middle.
that harkens back to gain sharing, which works in some industries and in some use cases, but has always been difficult to work with in HR. I see outcomes based selling, so a lot of the things that you've been talking about,
Yes.
Thomas, that are do one thing and do one thing good. I think it's long been practice for providers to shout a use case or something that worked out really great, and then pack the promises and the opportunities around that. So, I'm sure that will continue.
Thomas, you mentioned earlier about incumbents, and I think I'd love your opinion here as an analyst as well, because this is something that always frustrated me about quadrants. Is a lot of organizations look at that and as a Bible, right? And they will purely want to buy off of that, which is, I think, unfortunate, because there are great solutions out there that get overlooked that are perfect for what they need, but they'll never get an at bat because they're not the big thing. What are your thoughts on just this? Your theory, because you've mentioned incumbents a few times. What's your point of view on that and the incumbent versus the enterprise providers right now? They're definitely moving faster.
Yeah. So I think first up, what's been interesting is that if we go back in history, like when we look at the shift from on-premise to cloud, the incumbents were laggards back then.
Yep.
Right. So your SAPs and your PeopleSofts and Oracles and ADPs and you name it, and IBM, Gartner, even.
Yeah.
They were all very cautious about the cloud, and quite hostile towards cloud computing until McKinsey was as well. Until Salesforce and Workday and SuccessFactors had their genuine breakthroughs. What we have now is exactly the opposite. We have the incumbent vendors embracing cloud, embracing AI. A lot of it is architecture, but kudos to the large vendors, because they actually have said, hey, AI is coming, we need to get our act together, and so on. Whether they've got their act together or not is a different question, but they've actually done a relatively good job of putting their act together. On the other hand, you've got startups who, get stupid valuations from people like us and are doing very cool stuff with AI. The people that are challenged actually are the ones in the middle, right? It's your 15-year-old vendor that's done okay in learning management or whatever, and they've neither got the deep pockets of the big guys, in terms of revenue, and stickiness and all the rest of it, nor have they got the funding of a startup. So those are ones where I think that's where I think the challenges is in that middle zone. But going back to the Magic Quadrant, I used to do these, and they have a purpose, and so what I'd urge people to do is read the inclusion criteria. Right? Why were these vendors selected into Magic Quadrant? And there's a set of rules that sets the governance framework of the Magic Quadrant, and use it like that. Don't just look at the picture.
Yeah.
If you look at the picture, then that's kind of like building IKEA furniture without reading instructions, right?
Yes.
You might get it right, but you probably won't, and you'll end up screwing it up. So what I'd say is that for people that look at the Magic Quadrant and moan about them and complain about them, I think that they serve a great purpose because they are thought through, well-researched instruments.
Yeah.
But you have to use them. You have to use them in the way that they're designed, and the way they're designed is not, vendor A markets the
right.
You see the charts, and then
what's the best? I get asked that a million times. What's the best? And I say, it's what's best for you and where you're headed.
What I'd say to companies is that the methodology of the Magic Quadrant is actually quite useful. With how the different quadrants are structured, and the innovation component and the ability to execute. That's a very good matrix to think about your own purchase purchase decisions. But the Magic Quadrant is typically designed for the very large, for the large enterprise buyer,
right.
which is Gartner's predominant customer. But what I'd say is that nowadays you're so much more opportunity to do to work with independent analysts, to do your own
Right.
do your own AI powered research. So you can do some exploring and some analysis.
Yeah, agreed. It's one milestone. It's one milestone. It's not everything, and I think it's just should be part of a bigger group of things that you're using to decide.
Yeah.
So
And the
I love that.
the procurement tools side of the house are bringing forward all sorts of AI enabled like aggregation of information about providers that that rivals what you can consolidate and find on your own.
Yeah, and what I'd say to HR is align with your procurement people, and don't. I see this sometimes is that HR will try and go around procurement. Oh, we can buy this ourselves or whatever, and it might work every now and again, but at the end of the day, like when you're dealing with a software vendor and a salesperson of a software company, they sell for a living, right? They do it every day, right? And your job in HR is to run HR. It's not to buy software. I'd urge you to partner early with your procurement people, help them understand what you want, and work effectively with them, because especially in an enterprise organization, that they're buying software every day, so it kind of levels the playing fields, especially when you're doing with the larger vendors.
Thomas, you've talked about big companies treating startups like enterprises.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
So you need to, as a large enterprise, if you treat your startups like you treat Workday, SAP, and Oracle, there won't be startups, right? You will kill them, right? You need to have a more collaborative and open way of working with startups, right? You need to put them in the box of what is this startup helping me solve, right? This particular problem. But then you need to work in a different way in which you work than you work with the large vendors. With the large vendors, it's a bit of an arm wrestle, right? With the smaller ones, you're the big elephant, and you can squash them. And you squash them in two ways. One, you squash them with a very long purchase cycle, and then you also squash them with your requirements. Because what I'd say to the big companies is spend time articulating your problem, but let the startup find the solution.
Right.
Because if you tell me how I have to build this, how many fields I have, how many whatever, that startup will build what you asked them for, because you're the big guy. So you've beaten them into submission to build what you want, but you're not a software engineer,
right?
So let the startup think of novel ways to solve your problem. Spend your time articulating what the problem is, and let them work to solve the problem.
So Thomas, look, I want to wrap this up with a couple maybe rapid fire questions here. I would love to ask you a million things, and you got to come back.
Come back on again another time.
Please. Yeah. So I want to ask you this. So based on your companies, your insights, everything that you know, what you see right now, what is a couple of things that are just really being underestimated right now, trends in HR tech as we go forward?
I think a couple of areas that are fascinating for me right now is integrations. AI opens up new ways to connect systems together much more effectively than we could in the past. And so this opens up the opportunities for you to work with more vendors than you could in the past, because you're able now to have smoother, faster integrations. So you're able to buy more niche components, manage them effectively than you could in the past. So that will lead to a flowering of vendors. And I would urge organizations to really look at the shifts that is happening in integration. You guys know Datascaler, and look at Combo, KOMBO. What these guys are doing on integrations is just it really does change the game. You can connect systems together in hours rather than months. And I think that's one area where I think that's changing.
Yeah,
I'd also say that look beyond Silicon Valley.
Good point.
There is a world of innovation in places like Singapore.
We've
done investments in Kenya. We've done investments in Belgium,
Africa,
in all kinds of places. And just listen to the Silicon Valley drum. It's very loud.
Yes.
It's very enticing.
Yeah.
But there's a world beyond. There's a world beyond Silicon Valley that I would say.
I would agree.
Open your eyes and mind to.
Yeah.
And then sort of, I'd sort of say finally, I'd say, going back to the point that I made earlier, learn something about AI.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that goes for everyone. Okay, let's take a little bit of an opposite look. Thomas, give me your most contrarian take about where HR and payroll tech are heading and what's something everyone is getting wrong.
I think that there's a revolution.
Yeah.
We haven't had a revolution yet. Yeah. Every little feature gets blown out of proportions as being like game changing. If I see another game changing revolution,
marketing, it's marketing
thing. It's like it's not a revolution yet.
I know
there's a revolution coming at some point, but it's not here yet. When it comes, we will know all about it, but it's definitely not there yet.
It's the breaking news 24/7. It's there every 5 minutes, right?
We need to dial it down a bit, and I think dial it down a bit and be stop chasing the latest shiny object syndrome. That's my request to the analyst community. Is like, let's stop labeling everything that every neat feature.
I agree
because every second Thursday the game changes, and it's not changing.
I agree. I can't tell you. I'm sure I can because you sit through a lot of them. I can't tell you how many briefings I sit through where it starts off, we're the only, and I have to start off by saying, no, you're not.
True.
I've had to burst a lot of bubbles lately, but yeah, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of that. Anyway, look, if I could ask you one more thing, Thomas, if you could give a piece of advice to every HR leader listening right now, how they need to be thinking about technology and the future and their careers or any of that in the industry, what would be your advice to those HR leaders?
What I do is I ground it in your business. And I'll give you a story from back in when I was at university. I grew up in South Africa, and mining was a big thing in Africa.
Yeah.
In South Africa, it still is, but at the time it was a very big thing. You used to see, mining was it's very much where you're going to have your career, and so there was once a thing where the CEO and a chief HR officer of the mine came to see us and talk to us, and they did this talk, and then they said, what's the most important piece of information that the chief HR officer should know every morning, right? And so many people put their hands up. Was an accident? Mining's dangerous. Was it an accident at night? Someone would say, are we drilling a new shaft or whatever? And then it turns out that the most important thing that the HR manager in a gold mine needs to know is the gold price.
Yeah,
to drill or not to drill,
the business. Right? So the gold price sets the tone for the mine. It sets the are we digging more out, or are we leaving it in the ground?
Right. Yeah.
Are we rushing to overtime, or that's driven by the gold price and the gold price predictions, the gold price futures, right? So and that stuck with me is that I think the best HR leaders have a deep understanding of the business that they work for. And the thing that I'd say now is that as you look at AI, don't look at AI, how does it impact HR? But look at how does AI impact work in our business?
Yes.
And that's the place you need to be. That's the discussion you want to be in. If your AI discussion is about, should I be using AI for recruitment, or should I use AI? Those things are useful, important discussions. But like, what's happening to the people in our business because of AI or not because of AI? And that's the discussion that you need to be really deep into and leading and participating in. The what happens to HR within that picture is of course important, but if you're thinking about HR, you're missing the point about the future of work.
Right.
It's about work, not about HR.
It's bigger than that. Yeah, no, I agree. I love that advice. Well, thank you so much, Thomas. This has been so fantastic. Where can everyone get in touch with you? Just
look me up on LinkedIn. So that's Thomas Otter. And our firm is Acadian Ventures. And if you search for me on Substack, Thomas Otter, you'll find me. So my my Substack is called Work in Progress. But if you're HR leader and you want to talk HR tech, you know where I am. And similarly, if you're a founder building something awesome, then you know where I am. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thomas, thank you so much. I'll make sure to share all those links. And as always, it's an open door. We'd love to have you back. Cool. And thank you to everyone for listening. As always, we'll be back soon.